Oh, YouTube fans, here again. And I figured I'd had a big test from my wonderful nephew. Why not this one? That is basically WCW. From the early days to the late days to the last days. Why not? Why not? This is more about WCW than the rise and the falls of WCW. So basically, as we all know, WCW is going on some days the wrestling mats. Come out roughly in the early 80s. And I remember the fond memories I had with me and my nephew. Back in those days, I used to babysit my nephew, and there was never anything on TV. It was always shit. So I remember getting all these videos of the golden days of WWF, right to the days of WCW. And I remember getting a lot of good offence. I remember getting a lot. I remember religiously almost every Halloween watching Halloween Effort. And I think the one I watched was Halloween Effort 1990. And then during the days, I then got Halloween after 1991. But yeah, I used to love Watson that. And we all know one of the main wrestlers, one of the biggest wrestlers, would have to be Sting. Sting was bigger than anything back in them days. And during, I think, 1990, we all know Top 2 come out, bid it dosing sequel. So to market Top 2, they had one there, if I remember rightly, Sting was in bars, and they had to have this look-alike walking, dressed up as Top, freeing Sting, who's trapped in bars. That's I like that one. I think it's called The Terminal or something. And I remember watching that on the Golden Days of video with my nephew. Watched it a lot, and it was a good one. And then, as this went on, this was when DVD was making it big and video was sadly was dying, so I managed to get these box sets. Dirt cheap, I can't remember now, but it was just £1, probably even cheaper than that. But it was like a box set of the best moments of WCW. Which, funny enough, you had the Becenter, who's sadly no longer with us. Becenter, you might remember Becenter in WWF. He was actually presenting WCW. He was showing the best moments, and there were some really, really good moments. There really was some bloody good moments. Like you had War Games. War Games was really good. It was in a big wrestling ring. I like the fact they had two wrestling rings joined together, and they had the big wrestling matches. I remember Bass on the Beats. I remember that being a good one. That's one where I remember right there. This was when Baywatch was doing its prime. It was doing Beat It So, one about this TV show, not a shitty film. And they actually had the task of Baywatch make a disappearance on Bass on the Beats. And I can never forget the NOO. The NOO was like the baddies of WCW, and we all know Odin was big in the golden days of WWF. We went the time he left WWF, and if I remember rightly, he went into WCW, but not as a gooder, but as a badder. And he joined the NOO. And I thought I liked that for a bit, you know what I mean? He drew a dark beard, and I thought it was a bit cool to see old Alden instead of being Baba don't die again, darling, fight for your life. I mean that theme tune. He joined the NOO. He was a villain. Didn't stay long as a villain, but it was memorable to see old Alden have a change of scene there and instead become a villain in WCW. So we had some really good fighters there, you know what I mean? You had a lot of big fighters, they were all the head of the time, and they had some really, really, really good matches. They had some good matches, like I just said, Halloween After, Bass on the Beats, War Games. They had some really, really, really good matches in the golden days of WCW. And it's like I said, it come out in the early 80s, it was big. I think at the time they was in competition with WWF. And as we all know, WWF, it was big, a lot of people watched WWF. And I remember the days, right? I think the first time I watched was WCW, and it could be right, it could be one actually. It was near Halloween. This was when we first got Sky TV, early 90s. And it could have been the one I actually had on video. Halloween after 1990. I do remember, I could be right, I could be wrong. It was aired either on Sky One at the time, and we watched the fight. This was back in the days when Sky TV was worth a shit. And I never knew at the time it was in competition with WWF. And we got it WWF. We got it WWE because of copyright of wildlife. When I was a kid, it was WF Schumer, right? So I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed it was different. I mean, I grew up at the days of British wrestling. You know, you had Big Dad there, you had Giant Eight Stack, you had all these other wrestlers. So this was like different. This was like American wrestling, and I liked it. Yeah, it was a fan, and it wasn't a fan. It wasn't a fan. And then I watched them. I watched WWF, and I think that's was the downfall. But it got through to the 90s into the early 2000s, the downfall were they were in competition with WWF. WF, if you don't know, was a bigger company, and sad to say, WCW went bust and it just went bye bye. And it's the same. It's the same because WCW, I felt, would have been dud. It would have been a dud event. Like Sting now, we all know, is in the other wrestling company, if I can remember the name of it. It'll come to me, I'm trying to think of the name of it. TNA, that's it. TNA Wrestling. Duh, I forget that. It's in TNA Wrestling, but back in the days of the early 90s, Sting was in his heyday. He was at his fucking best. He was in his prime. You know what I mean? All these date wrestlers were in the prime. They had all, you know what I mean? Had all these date fucking wrestlers. I remember one, and I can't think of it. It could have been War Games or another one. But I love the one where they both these big wrestling rings, and they was joined to death, and they both had this big fight. So one fought in the other ring, then the one fought another ring when they was wrestling. See, them days of wrestling, I like. Even Dodd's getting excited. He's making it rain outside. You hear a bit of noise. That's a wonderful referee. I knew the sun wouldn't last long. But yeah, there was pretty tastic in them days. And yeah, I remember those days. Well, if you're watching Dylan, yeah, I still remember them days when I could put them on video. We watched WCW to death, and there was a lot of really, really good ones. Like I just said, Rewind Back, Irene Affert, Bash on the Beats, War Games. And we had a lot of great moments in them days. I mean, it wasn't just a wrestling match. It was an event. It was an event. So those days now have done, they've gone, but there was something you can memorise. Like the videos, I remember right, they come out on, back in the early 90s, and they were fucking bitty expensive back then. Just now you could pick them up dirt cheap, but back then they were very expensive. Wrestling was popular during the days of the early 80s. WCW was in its heyday. It was a popular brand, just like WWF is a popular band. So was that. And it was. So back then, you know, it was a date remembrance of the golden days, some of the date wrestlers. You know what I mean? And you had like a lot in them days, a fucking lot. And that's one thing you don't see now in wrestling. You don't see a character wrestlers. There's no characters anymore. There's no duddies and baddies. You don't know who you fucking root for. Back then, you had all that. And it was entertaining. It was a fun event to watch. So these were the days of WCW. But into them, be smart, be safe. I'll probably talk. My next one I'll probably talk about. If I get my words right. The fucking folks messing with me. The next one I'll probably talk about. You can hear me because it's pissing it down. Will be WWF. In the golden days of that when it was WF. Assuming for copyright wildlife, it was WF. It was always WF. It's what annoys me, right? It's what annoys me. You get the early ones on DVD. Before they say the word F, and they fucking blur that word like it's a dirty word. They blur it so you don't hear the word F because of copyright. But you know what? F it. I'll say the F word. In the early 90s, when I was watching it, it was called WWF. I don't give a shit. You get days of video, it was called WF. You can't have me done for copyright. That's what it originally was called before wildlife threw the dodo out. Because, you know, I've got more into that when I go into WWF. I'll blame the word. But yeah, those are the golden days of WCW. Talk about other things on the way. And like I said, the next one I'll talk about will be WW Beep. that one. But until then, be smart, be safe. See you later, Dylan.